Whoa, intense. Welcome to Liberty Bugle Town Hall. Well, which pill would you want? Would you want to handle the truth, or would you prefer not? Would you want people like the Colonel to operate under the premise that they know better what we should or should not know? Most Americans who value what this country was built on and the blood that's been spilled to protect it aren't afraid of the truth and don't hide from it or try to whitewash it, however uncomfortable it may be. We used to think we could count on quality journalism to keep us informed of the factual truth, but that was and remains naive. History has always been written by the victors, and their interpretation of events couldn't help but have a bias in their favor. Objective journalism is long gone, having been replaced by a plethora of propaganda from which we can choose to support our preferred paradigms. Thankfully, many of us recognize this folly for what it is and prefer critical thinking realism. We're willing and want to engage the cold, harsh, wondrous reality that is the naked truth and come to our own conclusions. Our forefathers equipped us with the Constitution that put the ability and responsibility to do that in each of our hands. They gave us the First Amendment. Here at constitution.congress.gov, we can see the definition of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition government for a redress of grievances. We can refine this a little further looking at our friend Wikipedia, where they define freedom of speech as a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. Now we can dig in a little bit further and see what does that mean? How has it been treated in the courts? If we look at United States Courts website, uscourts.gov, we can see that the U.S. Supreme Court has wrestled with this through the years, just exactly what does constitute protected speech. And here are several examples going back to that definition of the First Amendment that we just looked at, the relevant part being Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. We can see that not only does freedom of speech include the right to speak, but it also includes the right not to speak. And this pertains specifically in a case where the West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett, the right not to salute the flag, which was established in 1943. Freedom of speech includes the right of students to wear armbands to school to protest the war. And we can see this was established in 1969. And if you remember, in our country in 1969, there were many protests around the country against the war in Vietnam. Now, this next one is particularly interesting. The courts have ruled that freedom of speech includes the right to use certain offensive words and phrases to convey political messages. This is particularly germane today, where censorship has run amok. But what's interesting is that this is not saying go out and use offensive words and phrases, but it's acknowledging that words and phrases will inevitably offend somebody. And just because somebody may be offended by certain words and phrases, that does not preclude an individual's right to use such words and phrases. There's a lot of nuance to this. This is pretty interesting. There are a few other entries you can see, and this is by no means an all-inclusive list. But there are some things that the court has ruled freedom of speech does not include. And these are worth looking at. A couple of these are worth looking at. To incite imminent and lawless action, Interesting, again, this was established in a time where there were a lot of very violent protests in our country. Another one, to make or distribute obscene materials. And then there are some more on the list as well. I'm not going to get into all of them. Now, one of the disclaimers that's listed on this site is that although we've got a lot of precedents here established from court cases, these are provided for educational purposes only, and you don't try to rely on them for your defense should you be on the wrong end of a lawsuit. So what's the point of this? Where am I going with all of this? Well, I want to ask you to focus on your right to do or not do a certain thing where you have the freedom to choose, and to ask you to consider a possible course of action in solidarity. One of the leaders today promoting freedom of speech is billionaire inventor and entrepreneur Elon Musk. He has maintained that preserving freedom of speech is his primary motivation for purchasing Twitter, which, over the course of its brief existence, has attained the status a kind of public town square. Recently, however, Twitter has unabashedly increasingly engaged in censorship, stifling speech on that town square. Musk says he'll reinstate free speech, yet he's already exercised his authority and declared some subjects off limits and some practitioners suspended. In other words, he himself has censored some content and users already. But if you look at what and who he has censored, he's quite in line with the guidelines that we just saw here on the U.S. courts.gov website. For example, Musk has restricted content by Antifa that is called or incited violence and the destruction of property. And Musk has also cited content related to pedophilia and child trafficking and sexual exploitation as primary among what he wants to restrict, matching these precedents here on uscourts.gov historically. Although for the time being Musk has instituted these restrictions with a rather heavy authoritarian hand, these two examples would probably fall within any website's terms of service to which users must agree, and which are aligned with the guidelines we see here on the U.S. Courts website. Now, Twitter needs revenue to pay its bills, and the main source of revenue for the company has been advertising. As Musk has restored formerly censored accounts and vows to provide a platform where free speech prevails, where he respects your maturity and ability to think for yourself, many advertisers, under pressure from Democrats, left-wing groups, woke celebrities, and their allies in the media, have begun to withdraw their ad campaigns from Twitter. It isn't clear whether they don't value freedom of speech, or they think you can't handle the truth yourself, or they only want you to have information they want you to have. They've withdrawn their ad campaigns from Twitter. Here is a list of companies that have begun withdrawing their advertising support of Twitter, so you can decide if you want to continue supporting them, since it seems they don't completely support true freedom of speech or your ability to think for yourself. It's your choice. Here's a partial list of companies to date that have withdrawn their support of Twitter. I'll put them in this format for a little bit easier viewing. To your liberty.